Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. A warning to our listeners, some of the topics discussed in this podcast may be disturbing. If you need support, please contact your local crisis line or helpline. And if you're in Hong Kong and you'd like to call the Samaritans hotline, you can call them on 2896 0000. Today I'm here with Emily Tan. Hi Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi Jules, I'm feeling really good today. I'm feeling really happy.
That's fantastic. Why do you feel so happy today?
I think I'm still riding on the high over the weekend. Over the week, my friends over at Tribe in Wong Chuk Hang, they organized an event called Open Stage. It's kind of like open mic, but for performing arts. And a whole bunch of people came in, they performed. It was so diversified. Everyone came in, pitched in. And one of the reasons why she organized this was to raise funds for me, as well as raise awareness on bone marrow donation. And I got that opportunity to speak in front of everyone about how difficult it is to find a bone marrow donor match as opposed to finding a blood match, because it's pretty different, particularly for Asians or for any minorities other than Caucasians.
Why is it more different for Asians or minorities to find bone marrow?
Well, one, we're not just matching blood type, we're matching HLA, human leukocyte antigen. And these are about different sequencing in your tissue. And it has a lot to do with your ethnicity and where your ancestry is. And what I think personally from what I've read as well is that there's a lot more education and awareness amongst more westernized countries like in the States and Australia, and a lot more awareness on that in Europe, where a lot of Germans are and Dutch. So Caucasians have a higher chance of finding donor matches across the board. Whereas in Asian countries, not many cities are well developed enough to be able to host a registry like that. And two, it also has to do with conservative families and customary beliefs that, for example, from what I heard in Islam, if you donate any part of your body, it's kind of considered like you're donating a part of your soul. But on the contrary, in Japan and Korea, from what I heard from my friends, they were taught to donate blood and anything else they could donate as a way to regenerate new cells. So I find it's interesting with this large contrast.
But that's life, isn't it? Because there's so many different contrasts in different cultures.
Yeah,
but I think
is.
One of the things that we can do is start to educate people about the ways that they can help. Emily, for our listeners out there, tell them a little bit about why you're looking for a bone marrow transplant.
I'm looking for a bone marrow transplant because it's been recommended by my oncologist and several doctors that I have second opinions from. I'm currently dealing with acute myeloid leukemia. I was diagnosed in early April this year. The type of leukemia I have, there are 4 types. The type of leukemia I have the lowest survival rate as compared to the other ones. 1, it being acute, and 2, it being myeloid as opposed to affecting your lymphatic system.
My understanding is that for some of the leukemias, there's a real possibility of going into remission, isn't there?
Yes, it isn't too difficult from what I read, considering my age and my current fitness level, I suppose, or my health level. It isn't too difficult to induce me into remission. I have been induced to remission. The problem is, what I've been told, is to keep the patients in remission. Hence why AML patients, there's a high chance of relapse within the first year or 2, unless a bone marrow transplant is carried out. And the bone marrow transplant isn't a definite cure, but it does increase my chance of survival and decrease the chance of relapse.
Do we have a bone marrow registry in Hong Kong?
We definitely do have a bone marrow registry. And from what I've been told, it is a pretty proficient one. It is also linked worldwide. For Hong Kong, Red Cross are the ones who do the registry procedures and so on for Hong Kong. And they're connected very closely to the one in China, as well as Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore. I would say these countries in Asia are the more prominent ones. as well as Japan and Korea.
Are you on a waiting list or you can't find a match? What's the situation?
I don't know what they call it, like terminology-wise, if it's called a waiting list, but I am on the list. I have been told that they have exhausted the search in Hong Kong. My donor hasn't joined the registry yet from Hong Kong.
Okay, well, hopefully your donors out there listening and they'll go and after this podcast, contact the registry. We'll give details at the end and hopefully you will find your match through talking to me and getting the word out there in Hong Kong. So fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed indeed.
And also your SCMP article that was in the paper recently as well. Hopefully that will reach out to many people and get them thinking about how they can help.
Yeah. I've been receiving quite a bit of support from SCMP as well as another publication before, Live Magazine, that's another Hong Kong bred one, as well as the Star newspaper in Malaysia. So these are like some of the publications who've been helping me getting the word out there. The other thing that I guess is not common knowledge is that I've been told that I have a higher chance of finding a donor or getting a donor if I stay in Hong Kong. Because I was going to pursue going to Australia, going to Europe, or maybe going back to the States where my family is. But they said China apparently is not exporting bone marrow at the moment, except for Hong Kong. So if I do find a donor and I'm not in Hong Kong, I would probably be screwing myself out of this.
Because so China is exporting bone marrow just to Hong Kong.
Just to Hong Kong.
And because you're Asian from Malaysia, is that right?
Yeah, well, my ancestry is Chinese.
Okay.
Like my great-grandparents are from South China. So my family and I think there's a higher chance I would get a donor from China.
Yes.
Or at least from some of these Asian countries around, as opposed to being in the Western country.
Yeah.
Despite, Australia having a high population of Asians, but it's still different depending on which strand of ancestry they're from. My great-grandparents immigrated to Malaysia. So my parents and my grandparents are born in Malaysia, but our family is Chinese.
You've exhausted the list. Can they go to Singapore? Can they look in other Asian countries for you or not?
Yeah. Once they have exhausted the search locally, which is in Hong Kong, they'll do a worldwide ping. For example, if someone in Singapore next week decides to join the registry and they happen to be matched, the next week, their tissue data would pop up in the system and it would ping whatever my application number is, and then my doctor will be notified.
Oh, okay. So
it does
fingers
go
crossed for you. Yeah, that's great. But what you need is for more Asian people to get in touch with the bone marrow registry in Hong Kong and put themselves forward for a match. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, for me personally, the more Chinese join the registry, then the more chance I have. But I think overall, the more Asians and the more minorities join the registry, the better it will be for everyone who has trouble finding a match. Through this process, I've been put in touch with Gift of Life Marrow Registry in the States, as well as BeTheMatch.org in the States. And I learned that comparably to Caucasians, which have over 70% chances of finding a donor match, Asians and African Americans are sub 50%. And
wow.
I mean, it's even worse if you are apparently from Latino blood or Indian blood. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just awful,
Yeah.
And because leukemia is a pediatric cancer. Actually, people don't realize adults and older adults can get leukemia, particularly someone of my age. I'm 33 this year. When people think of leukemia, they think, oh, it's a pediatric cancer. It's a kid's cancer. Kids get it. And it's always a cure. That's not true. There isn't a cure. There's a high chance of success and being cancer-free and staying cancer-free for some types of leukemia, but not the one that I have. And there are a lot of other blood cancers that are considered pediatric, but because there's not enough funding going into the research.
Well, that's a shame as well.
That is a shame. I mean, like,
it?
For example, we just finished Pink October, right? And there's so much funding going to breast cancer. And when I spoke to the oncologist from Australia, he said, it's great if we're able to do something like that for just about every single cancer out there. And breast cancer awareness is living proof to see how much we can do just by raising a bit of awareness. A lot of people out there are wearing a simple thing as wearing pink, simple thing as sharing something. And even if it doesn't affect you, like even if your family is cancer free or you don't have any friends or family who never experienced cancer, it doesn't mean that you can't contribute to the cause.
Of course. And it doesn't mean that one day you won't be touched by cancer in some way or another, whether it's a friend or family or somebody that you work with. It could be anybody.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Not to sound
sound
like a
negative
cynic
or miserable. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. Until we are able to put a lot more funding into research, it's kind of like prevention's better than cure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you look at Movember as well.
Yeah.
That's for prostate cancer.
Exactly.
So that's raising awareness there and has made a difference. It would be great if we had something specifically for leukemia, but I don't know that there is there? There's
So
no
far,
sort of awareness week or anything like that.
correct. I mean, we just had Blood Cancer Awareness Month, and that was in September. Coincidentally, it was my birthday month, so I was double happy about that.
Oh my gosh, that's that's weird.
I know, that is
Isn't
weird.
it spooky?
Yeah, but in terms of like specific events, actually World Marrow Day was 3 days after my birthday too.
Oh, so there is a World Marrow
There is
Day,
a World Marrow
but it's
Day.
not highly publicized,
It's
is
not
it?
highly
Because I've never
publicized
heard of it.
Exactly. It was an initiative started by two of the groups from the States. And that's probably why any initiative starting from the States, but not gaining enough traction internationally, they probably won't get the same type of response. I think the other thing is, I'm not quite sure why, but even when I went on social media online to look for other patients who've been touched by leukemia, specifically AML, I haven't been able to find a lot of cases where people do share about their experiences.
Why do you think that is?
Personally, I have my own reserves about why initially, but after speaking to my therapist and I understand, oh, yes, that could be a reason. One, I am pretty westernized. I would imagine that if I hadn't lived in America, I probably wouldn't have the same outlook in terms of sharing. So from what I understand is in a more stereotypical or conservative Asian family, when you share something about yourself, you're not only sharing about your own problems, you're sharing about your parents. You're sharing about the whole family.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
and it's a face thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You're not the only one who get it. Your parents are the one who get it. Take, for example, I received a spam message once on Instagram and it said, you got leukemia because of your dad. And I was shocked. I mean, I didn't know, of course I blocked the person, but that made me realize like, me going public with this isn't just to raise awareness on bone marrow donation and the fact that blood cancer is not as researched as something like breast cancer or prostate cancer, but it's also, I'm putting my family in the light. And luckily for me, my family's strong. My family's tough and resilient. And if anything, we will always go back to, look, other people's opinions are not helping us. So forget what other people's opinions are and rely on what we can do to recover.
Good for you. That's a brilliant philosophy. And I think that there are many people out there that will appreciate that so much. And this is such an important conversation to have. And if we can reach one person or help one other person to register with the bone marrow registry, that would be absolutely amazing. And that's really the purpose of doing this, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's not that hard to donate to the registry or to be on the registry. For Hong Kong and the Red Cross, they only do blood samples. They don't do saliva swabs. Whereas in the States, in the UK, and Australia, and Singapore, they do saliva swabs. So what they do at the Red Cross is they take a blood sample from you, 5 to 10 mil of blood. Your tissue data goes into the registry. And if a match comes up, then you're called in and you are asked to go through a comprehensive health test. What I have learned is they are pretty protective of the donor. If you are not eligible, for example, if you're over a certain age, or if your tests come back saying that, well, you have low nutrient readings on this and that, or if you're pregnant or if you're ill, you won't be eligible to donate. So don't worry. It's not like once you've registered, you're committed for life. It's not like marriage.
Even marriage, you're not committed to life.
That's
I
true,
hate to
but
tell
it's
you.
even less committed than marriage.
That's so funny. How did you first find out that you had leukemia? What sort of symptoms or signs did you have?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the symptoms and signs. I knew something was not quite right when I had a fever about 5 days in a row. I kind of subjected to the fact that I was traveling a lot at that time. Like back in March, I was traveling through 3 different continents and about 5 different cities in the span of a month right beforehand. By the time I got to Madrid and I was due to take a train to Alicante, I was already feeling pretty shitty, like pretty crappy. Yeah, pretty crappy.
Shitty's fine.
Okay, just check it. Yeah, it was like the shittiest train ride I've had ever in my life. You might have just opened a can of worms there.
That's okay. You feel free. So you didn't feel well on this train journey?
No, actually, the whole time I wasn't feeling well.
In what way, though? Was it lethargy? Were you nauseous?
It kind of started when I came back from Phuket after I attended my friend's wedding. I had a toothache, and this toothache was so far in my jaw, I thought it might be a wisdom tooth kind of thing. I went to the dentist. The dentist said, no, it's not a wisdom tooth, but it does seem like your gum is somewhat exposed. So leave it alone, take some antibiotics and painkillers, and that's it. So I left with that, but the fever didn't go away and the pain didn't go away. So I was self-medicating with Advil and ibuprofen pretty much until I was like transiting Dubai and then got to Madrid and I realized, I forgot Madrid is cold during this time of year and it's still cold. So I was probably putting myself in the worst situation by not preparing for the weather. I was pretty cold. I was still tired, By the time I got to Alicante, I was really tired, really unwell. My head was foggy, cloudy, heavy-headed. I was sniffly. I had lost all appetite as well as my taste buds. I tried to eat rice cakes. Being healthy, I almost threw up from my mouth being too dry. And the only thing I could eat at the time or drink at the time was Gatorade. That was the only thing that was going down. Nothing else was going down.
Wow, that's interesting. And you probably really needed those.
It's
rehydration. Yeah, the electrolytes. Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't realize, wow, this is really weird. I mean, in a way, it's kind of cool to fast. But also, this is wrong. I waited another day to see if it would go away. What troubled me that night is having red spots appeared all over my body, particularly around my ankles and my calves. These red dots, they didn't look like pimples or anything. They literally looked like some kid just took a red marker, a ballpoint pen, and just like drew dots all over your leg.
Wow, how weird.
And it just kind of spread like tie-dye all over the body.
Okay.
That's when I knew, okay, something's off. So I told my friend Richard, and he said, okay, I'm taking you to the hospital the next day. So he took me to the hospital. I thought it was just a really bad cold. So did he. Went there, told him my symptoms. They took a blood test, which is unusual, right? I was expected to be given
Panadol. Yeah,
Panadol, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But I took a blood test, and I got transferred to another hospital. And I thought, oh, maybe they do it differently in Spain. So I got there. They had me in A&D, and after about 8 blood tests later, and about 3 different doctors later, because no one was speaking English fluently. But yeah, finally a doctor came in and told my buddy what he thought it was and what they suspect it was. So my buddy Richard had to translate to me. The whole time when I think back, I'm like, it must have been awful for him to have to translate to your friend saying the doctors think it might be leukemia, but they won't be able to confirm anything. They don't want to confirm anything until they do more tests, and they'll let you know tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. So how did you react initially when you heard this news?
Honestly, I was a little confused because I was thinking, leukemia, that sounds familiar. What exactly is leukemia?
You didn't realize it was cancer at the time.
No, I didn't know. I thought leukemia was a disease. I didn't know it was a cancer.
Right, okay.
Because just like anyone else who are not aware of the different types of cancer out there, thought leukemia was something you get as a kid. Just like kind of like chickenpox, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made the mistake of going on Google, and all I had to do was read blood cancer. And I thought, I am not reading anymore. Turn Google off, switch my phone off, and just digest what the nurses and the doctors are trying to do and what my friend was trying to do as well in terms of talk to me. And so the next day they confirmed it was leukemia, and chemo started about 2 days after that. I mean, my dad flew out right away.
This is in Spain?
This was in Spain,
oh,
yeah.
Right.
My dad flew out right away, and he was looking for alternatives, right? Because my grandma had breast cancer, and he had to witness her go through lots of chemo, and she's no longer around. But he was wondering if there's an alternative to chemo. And the doctor just straight up told him, and I like how straight to the point they are too in Spain. No, there's no time. She will die.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And so it was straight into chemo.
It was straight into chemo.
And chemo can make you feel quite sick, can't it? Did that happen to you?
Absolutely. I was on morphine for the pain, and I couldn't eat. Didn't have solid food for 8 days either because I couldn't eat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. There are different grades of chemo. The first round of chemo that they give for my type of leukemia is called induction chemo. It's for 7 days, and it's a drip that runs 24 hours a day for 7 days. For the first 3 days, it's a combination of 2 different types of chemo drugs. And the common side effects for that would be hair loss, of course, intestinal pain, nausea, fever, massive drop in platelets. There's a whole list. I can't even memorize all of it now.
Yeah, sure.
But the symptoms that I felt right away was definitely intestinal pain.
So you had to have the morphine for that pain.
Yeah, it was that bad. And when they took me off morphine and the pain was still kind of there, I just thought this is like the worst menstrual cramp multiplied by 100.
Wow.
Because it wasn't like, oh, come and go. It came and it stayed a night kind of pain.
Oh, no. And this is all while you were in hospital?
Yeah, I was in the hospital for that one for 25 days.
And you were on chemo for most of that time?
Chemo for 7 days, but the side effects would kick in a week and worse 2 weeks after chemo.
That's why you stayed in hospital, so you could be monitored and looked after.
Yeah. So all my visitors, they need to wear a mask and a whole suit that covers their shoes and their body just to prevent me from getting infected. But I still got infected anyway. I had pneumonia.
Oh, no. What?
Yeah, I had pneumonia.
That's because your resilience goes right down, doesn't it, when you're on chemo?
My immune system was already trashed.
Yeah.
And he was even more trashed from that.
Oh, my gosh. How did you cope with having cancer and pneumonia at the same time?
I actually didn't know. Honestly, everything was a blur. I didn't even know I had pneumonia until I was discharged, and I was reading my report. And I looked at it like, oh, I had pneumonia? How did I do? Is it still there? Yeah.
That's so funny. Then did you have, after the 7 days of chemo, any more chemotherapy?
Yes. After they're able to induce leukemia into remission. It's what they call morphological remission. It shows as remission currently, but until it stays that way for a certain time, it's not classified as a full remission or complete remission yet. Every round of chemo after that is called consolidation chemo. And it's a different drug as well, but the duration is different. For Hong Kong, apparently they do in 2 days, 4 doses in 2 days.
You haven't had that yet? Or
Yeah, I've done 3 rounds of that.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
How was that in comparison?
In comparison to the first one, it was a breeze.
Okay.
It was a total breeze compared to the first one. I mean, hair loss happened in my first round. Everything pretty much happened in my first one. And I know that if I'm able to withstand that first round,
you can cope with anything.
I can cope with anything. It is cool. It's cool. Stub my toe? No problem.
How has having cancer affected you personally?
The most is probably emotionally. And the reason why I say that is I think psychologically and physically, I've always been quite confident and quite sure and quite certain. I'm able to tell what is what, able to filter my thoughts and distinguish what works and what doesn't. But when it comes to emotional outbursts or just like a wave of sadness will come over and I would sit there kind of lost. Like, I'm not familiar with this. I've never felt this. I've been depressed before, but that was when I was 15 and that's a whole different thing. And I haven't felt that way for a while. But what I do notice is how vulnerable I've become and how much strength I found in that vulnerability.
That's so interesting that you found strength in vulnerability. So by being vulnerable, it's given you a shield?
It's not really a shield. By being able to expose my weaknesses, I find that takes quite a bit of strength to do so. It's easier for me to not do that. It's easier for me to not share about my story, about what happened to me. It's easier for me to not tell my friends or my family how I feel. It's easier for me to have not accepted the interviews from SCMP and Live magazine when they asked me about how do you have resilience? How did you build resilience? It's much easier for me to just sugarcoat it.
Why are you digging deep? Why are you opening up? Why are you doing that?
Probably prior to diagnosis, for about 2 to 3 years, I've been more interested in self-experimentation, whether it's diet or whether it's a form of fitness regime or a practice of mindfulness, meditation, lifestyle habits, that stuff. It's always been there, but probably in the recent 3 years, it's been more commonly practiced. I find that this is another opportunity for me to experiment for myself how deep I can go into my emotions and how brave am I really? You know, I mean, I've been told that I'm brave.
Super brave,
At the same time, I'm kind of thinking, well, you don't really have a choice. You know, you've been given this diagnosis and it's either you do in order to survive or you don't do and just enjoy every day as it goes. Or can you do both?
What do you think the answer is to that?
I don't know if that comes down to bravery. I think that comes down to the choice that you decide on making based on which fulfills you more. So when it comes to feeling brave, I would say if I'm able to cut down all these layers and masks that we've put on throughout our entire lives, I think that shows more bravery.
I read in the South China Morning Post article that your doctors have said that you have psychological hardiness. What is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to clarify, those aren't my doctors because she wrote the article and she interviewed 2 other psychologists based on that.
Do you agree with the fact that you're psychologically hardy?
You know what? Psychologically hardy does sound much cooler. So I like to sound like whatever that is because it sounds really cool. Yeah, I'm hardy.
Yeah, super hardy. I think it means that you've got a strength and resilience or coping mechanisms that many other people in your situation wouldn't have. And I think it's a huge compliment.
Yeah, I'm learning to take that as a compliment, although there are many times where I think I'm a little unworthy of that compliment because it doesn't feel like I'm making a huge effort to try to be psychologically hardy. It just feels natural.
You're just being yourself.
Correct. I'm just doing what I would usually do when it comes down to dealing with a difficult time. Look, it is what it is, and I feel how I feel. I can either sit here and dwell and nothing will change, or I can do something and something will change.
Brilliant. That's a great philosophy. I read that you had some really difficult times and life has thrown you some curveballs over the years.
Yeah, well, particularly from 15 onwards.
Tell me a bit about your backstory and how you have some of the difficult times that you've dealt with and how perhaps that might be linked with where you are now and this psychological hardiness. Maybe you've got that because of what you've been through in the past. Is that possible?
I would think it's possible, that's for sure. The reason why I say that is because I think how we form our thoughts and how we form our opinions when we are, from 13 onwards, like those are really formative years. I mean, take criminals, for example, take rapists, for example. They don't turn 25 and all of a sudden decide to rape. It's not like something they have decided to do. It's definitely comes down to their upbringing. How were they loved by their parents? How were they loved by their mothers? How were they treated? How were their parents treating each other that influence how they see what's okay? How were they educated on consent? Do they even understand what consent means? And so on. So I think that has a lot to do with it. For me, I think I've been pretty lucky growing up in Malaysia. I had a pretty good life. I had a pretty kind of boring life. Not really boring, but, compared to someone with a dramatic life, it's pretty boring, but it's secure. It's safe. It's certain. It was only since I moved to America when I was exposed to racial discrimination. And that was surprising to me initially. Like when I got teased for my English, that was like the first thing that hit me. I'm like, I'm speaking the same language. Why am I still made fun of? So at the time, I had to quote unquote, fix my English as quick as possible in order to not be laughed at. And English is my first language.
Oh my gosh,
it's just, we just have a different accent speaking it in Malaysia.
Of course.
Yeah. And just like in Hong Kong, we have different accents.
What age were you when you moved to the US?
I just turned 13.
Okay. Yeah. So what happened to you at 15 that changed your life?
In 15, I had lost my virginity in a manner that is not favorable. And it's taken me a long time to terms with what it was. Today, it's being classified, and it is what it is. It's rape. But when I was 15, I didn't think it was rape because, one, it was my boyfriend at the time. And I made it clear that I did not want to sleep with him. I was not ready for sex. And two, I was at a party and there was drinking involved. So I already feel like I'm partially to blame because, of course, that's what we're being told. Well, of course you asked for it. You were at a party, you were drinking, you were your boyfriend. What do you expect is going to happen, right? And three, I never left him.
Right.
I never confronted him. Well, I tried again. Like the second time he tried to initiate sex, I told him, look, I really don't want to do this. And he said, you might as well. You're not a virgin anymore. And that had like a double impact on me saying, wow, I guess I am tarnished in that sense. I think the reason why it hit me that hard is because I grew up as a Christian. I grew up going to Christian school and Sunday school. And I was in Christian school in America too. Just like the year before I was 15, I had just watched a documentary in school about abortion.
Oh, right.
So it was pretty fresh. It was a big hit. And for me, it felt like I had sinned heavily. And
that's a massive burden, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a massive burden.
Yeah.
But I don't think that really hit me until my mom came in one morning and she threw something on my bed and she said, do this. I didn't know what she was talking about. I mean, I was trying to get out of going to school because I was feeling sick. I just thought I had a case of food poisoning, but my mom knew. Moms always know.
Yeah. Moms are tuned in.
Yeah. It was home pregnancy tests. And that was literally all that we've spoken about the topic. Is her throwing the box at me, telling me to do it, and that's it. We never spoke of it again, even after the abortion.
How did you arrange an abortion and all of that?
The abortion was my dad made the appointment for the abortion. It was hard telling my dad because I knew I was a disappointment, and that took on the burden as well. And it was so hard telling him because, not just for me, but it was because I could see the pain in his eyes and the sadness on his face because all he's thinking of, I came to America, brought my family to America for a better life. And here I am disappointing him that way. But I didn't tell him what happened with the guy. I just told him that I had sex.
They didn't know the actual circumstances.
No, not until the SCMP article. So that's going to be an interesting conversation coming up.
Oh my gosh. So they've only just know.
Yeah, my parents didn't know. Neither did my brothers. No one knew, actually.
Wow, that's heavy.
I think the reason why I didn't tell anyone is because in my head, in my own inner dialogue, I've never called it rape. I don't know why. Could be partially I've never been able to admit or accept that it wasn't my fault. It still felt like my fault.
You know what? I think you were so young. He was your boyfriend. You had said no. He didn't have consent, but there wasn't the talk about consent back in those days like there is now.
No,
like we have a much greater understanding of consent and what it means. You were Christian from a Christian school. There was that whole layer of all of that, of having sin. I think you can't blame yourself for the reaction and the way that you dealt with it. You did the best that you could at the time with the tools that you had and the knowledge that you had. And I think it's only as an adult and seeing, becoming out in the world and seeing what's really going on and learning more about what actually did happen to you that you can look back. And there are many other people around the world in a similar situation to you. There are so many and so brave of you to talk about it. And thank you for opening up about it. And I hope that if there's anybody else out there in a similar situation, that they speak up and they get help and support. Find a trusted adult, find a doctor, find a counsellor, find someone to talk to, because it's not a burden that you should carry on your own. because that's what you've done for all these years, haven't you?
I appreciate you saying that. And it's really nice to hear that it's not entirely my fault. But at the same time, you're right. And the reason why I opened up...
It's not your fault at all. Sorry, I didn't get my message across clearly. It's not your fault at all, whether you were drinking. And this is what young people need to understand. How you're dressed, whether you're drinking, whatever's going on, whether you put yourself in a situation where you're alone with someone or whether you're dating them or whatever. No means no. That's it. That's it.
I agree.
None of it is your fault. I didn't mean not entirely your fault. I meant none of it was your fault.
Yes, you're right, Jules.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Psychologist Jules here. I am not a psychologist, guys.
But having said that, what you said is right. And one of the reasons why, when Live magazine first asked you for the interview, the reason why I was battling with, should I share this or not, is the fact that, look, if I don't share, then I become just another statistic that doesn't get to be known or to let people know that it is okay to be vulnerable and to share this. And the more people know about it, then the more we can do about it.
It's incredibly brave, but also incredibly important, because even if there's one person out there now, we've had one listening who's got cancer and gotten help and support for whatever they're dealing with. And now somebody who's gone through being raped may get the courage to speak up or ask for help. And that's because you have the courage to share your story. And it's so important. And if we look at the numbers in the Me Too campaign of how many women and men, but a lot more women have been sexually assaulted or raped worldwide, it's huge. It's just been absolutely massive. And it's had a snowball effect where one person talking has inspired another and another and another. And there's some solidarity in that, and there's some support, and there's a real community growing, I think, where people a sense of understanding and acceptance rather than blame and guilt and feeling terrible about yourself. So I hope that you can move to that place as well. But I mean, it's amazing. You only shared about this a few days ago.
I will get there. And yeah, if anyone out there is listening and able to relate, is there's no comparison. I think initially I was also, one of the reasons why I never shared it was, to think that there are different degrees of rape, but you know what? Rape is rape. We're not trying to compare stories here. Just because yours is a milder version and the other person is like an extreme level doesn't mean that we can't all come together and discuss what is important. This has been one of the reasons why I've been interested in working with youth when it comes to youth seeking refuge when they're faced with hard times, or when they're assaulted in school, when they're abused in school, or when they're in a not sexually abusive or physical abusive, but emotionally abusive relationship. I didn't recognize that I was in an emotionally abusive relationship with my first ex-husband until I left and educate myself on what that actually was and be able to reflect from time to time what that entire relationship was based on, how I was treated, how I was spoken to, and how I was manipulated, or why did I behave a certain way and how did I behave a certain way? What was I reacting to?
Yeah, and I think if we educate people at a younger age about what a good relationship is and what a functional relationship is, then it's easier for people to recognize when they're being mistreated or when things aren't going right. And then we can give them the tools to be able to get out of those situations. Having the permission to be able to say no and I'm leaving makes it much, much easier when you're young and vulnerable.
Yeah. I definitely think so. And also bringing to light that this women, it isn't just girls who are facing this. Can you imagine the burden back then for guys, what it takes to be a man, or the idea of masculinity back then is so different from modern masculinity today. I'm so stoked whenever I see talks or even celebrities coming together, forming a roundtable discussion on masculinity, what they grew up dealing with and how they want to be an influence on younger men today. The other thing is also, I don't want to fall into the victim category because I saw that as a weakness and I see it as a strength.
Yes, but many people would say you're a survivor, not a victim.
That also has a weird term. I don't know how I relate to that term either, because survive just seems, I don't know. It still comes down to me thinking, look, I did what I have to do. That's it.
You don't see yourself really as a victim or a survivor. Correct. It just was.
In terms of victim or labeled as survivor, it still comes down to being labeled as something. And for a while now, I've worked towards not labeling myself as anything. If I were to have a Tinder profile and I would describe myself, I would probably not describe myself in adjectives in terms of labeling. I don't label myself as an adventurist. It's more like that's what interests me and that's what I like to do. And these are my values in life. I would be more interested in someone who describes themselves in that way versus classifying or putting yourself into a certain box. Even though it's a fun box, you're still putting yourself in the box.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of any labels. It's up to the person to label themselves if they want to.
Correct.
We can't label them. Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, going back in the day whenever we label anyone as a victim or a survivor, it has different connotations to it.
Yeah. Survivor seems to be more positive than victim, doesn't it?
Correct.
But you don't have to have any label. But do you feel that going through that experience helped you build resilience and helped you be stronger?
Today, I would recognize that as yes. Back then, I was probably recognizing as, I'll just be a cold-hearted bitch. And that kind of helped.
So did you kind of just sweep it aside?
Yeah, I was asking my therapist, and the reason why I went to see her, I wanted to ask her, look, I want to understand two things. One, have I properly dealt with what I've been through? Or have I just been really good at suppressing things?
Yeah, and what did she say?
Well, she said, let's see, because that was the question I asked her in the first session, and it probably wasn't fair that she gives me an answer in the first session, right? But so far, she said, I've been doing well. And coming from a professional, that gives me the confidence of continuing to do what I do. And
I believe also from reading the article that there was a time where you tried to take your life. Can you tell me about what sort of emotional space you were in at that time?
I think that space was probably more lost in guilt. When you grow up Christian, that's a large part of that practice. So after the abortion, I felt like I had sinned. I was not worthy anymore. And since I've already done one of the biggest sin, I might as well do the next sin, which is just take my own life. I didn't see how valuable it was at the time, the relationship I had with my brothers and my parents. It was a pretty self-absorbed time.
I think it's amazing how much shame and guilt can overcome you and can take over your being. And it can make it very hard for you to see the positives.
Absolutely. It's kind of like you're being thrown on the well and that's all you see in darkness.
Yeah.
But there is that one rope. If you turn yourself down the well, or you had a way to go down, right? If you climb yourself down a wall, the rope is still there and it's up to you if you want to.
What was your rope on to get out? How did you get out of that terrible feeling?
I don't remember specifically how. All I did remember was when the knife cut through and I thought, wow, this seems much easier in the movies than it is in real life. I'm going to have to do a lot more cuts.
Yeah.
To get the job done.
Did you really abandon the attempt?
Yeah. I had a moment of realizing this is silly and I snapped out of it.
And you stopped?
Yeah, and I stopped. Okay. I snapped out of it.
And then did you get psychological help? Did you see a counsellor?
No.
Or?
At the time, seeing a quote-unquote shrink, we call them shrinks a lot at the time, was considered taboo. It wasn't something that you would definitely want to talk about, especially in American high school. I think one of the reasons why I didn't talk about it to any of my friends or to any of my classmates is slut shaming is such a big thing growing up in high school, even from 8th grade.
Well, you were at a Christian school, weren't you?
I was in a Christian school, and then I got transferred to a public school after that. But slut shaming was definitely a big thing. You don't walk around being called a slut. You don't be walking around being called this and that. So if anyone ever found out that 1, you were raped, 2, you had an abortion, 3, you tried to kill yourself, 4, you're seeing a shrink, you'd be a total outcast.
And you're still a teenager at this age. So hard to process all of that.
I think what helped was I threw myself into work. I didn't really do anything that was school activities. The first school activity I did was join the rugby team in senior year. That was like, oh, my school spirit.
Did you love it?
Oh, I loved it.
You found your tribe.
It was the first girls team that school had done. And
cool.
Coincidentally, it was my senior year. So I only had my senior year to play. I wish I could play more. I wish I could have done more. I kept missing practices because I had to work. But I think throwing myself into work and pretty much exhausting myself kind of helped.
Yeah.
I think when you're idling around and having your thoughts
running around in your head, it's hard, isn't it?
It is so much harder.
If you keep busy and do stuff that makes you feel good, you start to feel better.
Correct. And also when I was hanging out with some of the girls, I realized their conversations would normally escalate from something that seems so normal and not a big deal of, but it would escalate through their own conversations. And I didn't want to be part of that.
What do you mean?
It could be something as simple as, oh, he didn't text me back. I wonder why. To all of a sudden, he must be cheating on you. I'm like, come on. It's just, you didn't get a text back and all of a sudden he's cheating on you. That's what I mean by it will escalate through a conversation between two people who are just trying to find their way. I'm not saying everyone has ill intention trying to steer the conversation in a certain way. I understand the people around me at the time were young and inexperienced, and I didn't want to jeopardize any of my own troubles to escalate it anymore.
Did anybody know about your attempt on your life? Your parents or teachers or anyone, or nobody knew?
No one knew. Until now.
Until the SCMP article.
Now,
my gosh.
So far, the only response I've gotten was from one of my brothers. He just sent me the link and a question mark, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We haven't, just in between my family, we haven't been able to talk about topics like these.
Just for the listeners out there, the article only came out 3 days ago. So, so right. There's only been a 3-day window because this podcast won't go up for a while. But from our chat now to when the article came out was only 3 days ago. So you don't really know your family's reaction yet to the article.
No, I don't know yet. I don't think they'll be sad. Actually, my parents would be sad. So my brothers, they would probably feel sad that I haven't told them. But then again, it's not like they tell me everything. And we all come from the same intention, which is we don't want to cause worry upon each other.
I think parents sometimes can feel sad because they would have liked to have helped, perhaps would have liked to have been there for you and offered support, moral support, financial support, whatever you needed. And sometimes as kids, we don't necessarily ask for that.
Correct. And when you're 15, it's, you think it's you versus the world and you're a rebel.
So then how did your life go in your 20s? So that was a hectic few years in your teenage years. How did you evolve into your 20s?
Got married when I was 24. I was already with him for about 5 years at that point, and I got divorced pretty much a year after we got married.
Was that traumatic?
That wasn't too traumatic, probably because I had decided at that point that marriage has a kind of like a false fantasy. Marriage is kind of like a false fantasy, and it was just a piece of paper. I was pretty naive at the time.
I was too. I got married at like 23. No, 21 when I got married. Ridiculously young. We live and learn, don't we? We
definitely live and learn.
We certainly can learn by our mistakes, for sure.
Correct.
For sure.
And also, growing up, I never fantasized about a white wedding or fantasized about being happily married with a white picket fence or anything like that anyway. So if anything, that first divorce wasn't too traumatic. What happened in that relationship, though, within the first year or two, I had learned that he was cheating on me with multiple people. And I had learned to keep that to myself. I didn't confront him.
Oh my God, you're so good at keeping everything to yourself.
Apparently. That needs to change.
See, well, I think you're changing it today.
That's changing now. Along with cancer, everything has changed.
Yeah, that's good.
Some might say the reason why you have this now is probably you kept everything to yourself. And there's an interesting study of this Dr. Gabriel Mate, and he talks about how trauma has a huge link to disease, including cancer.
Oh, interesting.
And how trauma has
So you've read up on this?
Addiction. Yeah, I'm not done with the book yet. I'm still reading the book. But the book is called When the Body Says No. So if anyone who's interested in this link, definitely look them up. But there are other writers and research on this.
And what's your thoughts on this? What do you agree, disagree? Is the jury out?
I'm curious. The jury's not out yet because I'm not done with the book. And to be fair, I would like to read more than 3 books to be able to come to my own conclusion.
Okay.
As opposed to just reading one book and saying,
Do you ever kind of think, why me? Why do I have cancer? Why has all this happened to me? Do you ever feel sort of hard done by your lot in life?
Actually, no. I wouldn't even say not really. I don't remember a single time when I thought, why me? It was more like, oh, this has happened. Well, let's see if I can get out of this. It's always been more of that reaction.
That's really cool. So you're kind of like a cup half full sort of person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always. Even getting mad at someone or being vindictive. Personally, I think it takes too much effort. And if I don't care enough about it, I'm not going to put energy about it. If I don't care enough about that person and that person being mean, put a distance. I don't even want to put energy into being mean back or putting in thought into, I can't believe this person is this way. It's that person, he is how he is. She is how she is.
How have you found people around you have been treating you since you discovered you had cancer? Just like friends and things like that or family?
Probably a mix. My closer friends and family, they treat me almost as normal, which I really appreciate. It's not like I am handicapped all of a sudden, or it's not like I'm fragile all of a sudden. They know me well enough to know that I can tough this out. For people who don't know me as well, but they've known me maybe on social media or I've met them a couple of times, they might be a little reserved when it comes to, oh, but Emily has this. Can she do this? And can she do that? It's probably more on the physical capabilities. But so far, I think I have proved enough that physical capabilities is just a small matter.
Is there anything that has changed that you can't do? I suppose you just have to take care of yourself, not to get sick or
Correct.
Be in places where you might be exposed to germs.
Exactly. It's more like my goals. Prior to this, I was doing a lot of things that were making me happy, but I was also chasing a couple of goals. They include things that I really enjoy doing, or things like parkour, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, weightlifting.
Parkour?
Yeah,
we
parkour.
Do parkour. Oh my God, really?
Yeah, when I was in Dubai for 8 months,
No
I was
way.
in parkour Dubai.
What?
And I swear, like, that was probably the second most fun thing I would tie Dubai to. If I go back to Dubai, it would probably be because of parkour.
Oh my gosh. So for people listening out there, can you tell us what parkour is?
Parkour is an art of movement, actually. But traditionally parkour is how efficient can you move through obstacles. Now, take that metaphor and apply that to life. How efficient can you move through obstacles? Do you need to go through a ginormous drama or anything like that to get over one thing that's supposedly tough? Or can you find ways to work through your own philosophy and apply what your theory is?
Oh my God, that's so moving. That's really special. Thank you for sharing that.
No
I love that. I love that a lot.
Yeah, like some people think, oh, why are you interested in jumping from rooftop to rooftop? My reply is, I am not interested in jumping from rooftop to rooftop. But I kind of like to know that I am able to if I need to.
See if I can escape.
I mean, same thing applies to martial arts. I was pursuing martial arts in BJJ and Krav Maga, and I've done Muay Thai for years leading up to that as well, and boxing, and I did MMA as well. But all of these were not because I was in the pursuit to be an MMA fighter or to go for a black belt in anything. It was more of practical reasons. I understand that I was traveling alone a lot in countries that are not exactly very safe as well for a single woman to be traveling through. And I like to be able to access these skills and these tools if I need to. At the same time, it was fun.
Yeah. And so do you still do any of that?
I am still able to do some. When I had my catheter in my PICC, my catheter in my arm, I couldn't do BJJ because that would get torn out and we don't want that to happen. But now that I have this out and I'm waiting for my central IV to be put in a port, a Hickman line, where my clavicle is, I'm kind of in this freedom zone. So I'm really happy to have found people out here in Hong Kong who have welcomed me into their home, their training home, like Chris Collins Action and Espada BJJ, who have been really welcoming. But I think largely it's been Joint Dynamics and Tribe that's like welcome you with open arms, as well as Warrior. And all of these places, they provide different homes for me. A Warrior has been Muay Thai. Muay Thai has been such a big part of my life as well since 2009. So that's almost a decade there. And Tribe is two of my best friends started that place. And that place is everything that anyone would like to go to. I don't know if you've heard of Tribe.
No, I have. I think actually one of the girls contacted me right back in the beginning of my podcast, I think.
Yeah, so they do dance there, they do weightlifting there, gymnastics, but mainly it's because they have this beautiful floor that I love to do my floor flow stuff. Floor flow is another training that I've done from this practitioner named Marlo Fiskin, and I took the course in London. It's not like something you can do anywhere because you will have the floor literally on you. So floor flow training is quite interesting. And for those who might have heard of like the movement culture when they do crawling stuff on the floor or stuff like that, but this is expressed beautifully through, some might call it dance, but some might just call it rolling around the floor gracefully.
My daughter does contact improv.
There you go. So think of contact improv, but with the floor.
Right, cool. Yeah, I did it once. I did contact improv once in Montreal.
Oh, wow.
It was cool. It was really cool. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Muskim Play, this movement group as well. It started by these two guys, Andreas, and there's another one who started practicing in Hong Kong named Dima. And if you look up hashtag HK movement practice, you'll see that pretty much. And they are students of Ido Portal, which a lot of people have heard of.
Do you see all of this as a possible way to get better because it's so good for your soul?
Oh, definitely.
And so healing?
Yes, definitely. All of these have a different healing aspect for me. Like martial arts help me connect with a part of me that says I'm a fighter no matter what. And I will always find a way out.
That's so cool again. Oh my God. I got to stop saying that's so cool. I mean, come on.
I mean, think of sparring, right? It's unpredictable. Whatever comes at you, you have to react. And or you either shy away or you will react, but not recklessly. And when it comes to expressing myself through free movement or through dance, that's just being able to express without words. And that's important to me as well. I've been told that I'm rather quiet and rather reserved, but I used to be shy. Now I'm probably more of, I don't feel like talking. I'm just tired. That's it. I'm just tired.
Have your dreams and goals changed since having cancer?
My dream hasn't changed. My goal has probably been reshuffled in terms of priority.
Because your health has become your priority.
Correct. My health is my priority, but I'm seeing an opportunity to be able to use my current situation to bring light to now a newfound purpose. And that is to raise awareness on blood cancer. And what do we do after we raise awareness of blood cancer? One is support research on it. And two is to support bone marrow donation to get more people registered as donors so more lives can be saved. It still breaks my heart whenever I see these are babies, toddlers, kids who are lying in the hospital bed. I mean, no one, but especially no kid needs to live majority of their life in the hospital.
Yeah, it's terribly sad, isn't it?
It is terribly sad.
So have you made connections with other people with leukemia in Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong, yes. Actually, just recently over the event on Saturday at Tribe, a member of the audience came up just as I was talking about bone marrow, and his name is Yvonne, and I was so moved because he was a recipient for bone marrow transplant through an unrelated donor 6 years ago for another type of leukemia.
And how's he doing?
He's here 6 years later. He's fine. He was there to watch his daughter perform.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, so that was very uplifting for me, and that gave me hope, so much hope.
And you know what? That's something you cannot lose sight of, is hope.
Yeah, we have to be frank here, right? Hope is not something that is present every day for me. Especially like I've been in touch through social media with people, especially around my age, who've been faced with any form of blood cancer. And about a few weeks ago, I learned that the one that I've been following had passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he was barely 22.
Oh, so that's too young.
Whenever I have someone tell me, look, you'll be fine, you're young, you got age on your side. And here I am remembering about this kid who's 10 years younger than me, and he didn't make it.
Having cancer make you think more about your own mortality and death?
Oh, it does. I've always thought about death.
Have you?
I guess probably more since I tried to take my own life. I've been thinking about death more, and it's not something that I can help. What I've been able to do is deviate those thoughts into something else instead. So whenever death, like just an impromptu thought of death comes on, I would try to think of, okay, we are going to die. We're all going to die one day. And I might die doing this, I might die doing that.
Parkour is a big risk.
That is a big risk. But if you get really good, then you would be at less of a risk. On the other hand, how can I use this thought now to kind of reset my thought process? So I would think about my own funeral instead. And thinking about my own funeral, I would ask myself, what would I want people to say about me at my funeral? And if no one has anything nice to say or anything worthy to say, am I doing anything in my life? Am I doing anything worthy in my life? And that helps bring back perspective in terms of what am I really chasing? For example, when I was doing a lot more teaching certification courses and being more involved in the fitness industry scene, being called a fitness professional, one might say, and going to different conventions and stuff, you would see people chasing after this competition of being called the personal trainer of the year or the instructor of the year. And as nice as that sounds, and as much as I want to pad my resume, like being known as an ambassador for Lululemon, for example, or this and that. And even though it feels kind of sucky to like not get it or be chosen over, I have to remind myself, well, what good are you doing to the world? Like, what good does that do for you and for the world? Does that make anyone's life any better? It doesn't. So, well, forget it and just chase something else that could change people's life and make an impact, make a positive impact in this world. The impact doesn't have to be at large. It'll be cool, but an impact is an impact, no matter how small.
Yeah, exactly. And it's things like this that can really make such a big impact. So thank you so much. It's amazing. How do you find that you can turn a negative into a positive?
Probably over the time. I think it comes down to efficiency. I like to be efficient in everything, including how much time I spend on the problem. So if I find myself spending too much time on the negative, it's pretty easy to tell myself to move on to the next thing, even though that negative thing might come back later.
Yeah, that's really good.
And we understand we're human, right? It will come back later, but
it's about not dwelling on stuff.
Correct.
I've heard or read or seen interviews with people who've had cancer before, and they say how it was such a life-affirming and a life-changing experience, and they really are able to take the positives out of it. Are you able to look at it in that way?
Oh, yes, for sure.
And what positives do you take out of having cancer?
I see this as a gift. And it's weird to say that. And it's weird when I first said it before.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it is. It is. Probably for different reasons. Like for personal reasons, whatever I was uncertain about before, I am way more certain now. For example, having children. I was uncertain about having children before. Now, it's never been more clear that I do want children. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
That is so interesting.
Yes.
But also come to terms that even if I don't, I can still have a fulfilling life. But I'm no longer on the fence. I definitely want children.
Right. So that's how one of your dreams has changed.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So interesting. What else?
It's reaffirming that the life I was on the way to pursue, or the life I was pursuing, is not wrong and it's not strange.
What are you grateful for?
Oh, I'm grateful for so many things. I'm largely grateful for my friends and family who have stuck by me the entire time. And even offering help when I never asked for a certain help. One thing mainly being asking for money. I hate being in a position to ask for money. I've been working since I was 14 and I pride myself in being very independent. But now in this situation, when a friend of mine asked me, listen, money-wise, where are you? And I had to tell him, I don't know. I haven't worked since April. I don't know what to do with income. I really don't know. That's when I just kind of gave up. I don't have the answers to this right now. And he set up a fundraising page, and this support that's been coming through, it restores any loss of hope in humanity, for sure.
That's amazing. How can my listeners find this fundraising page?
There's a Facebook support group just for this page. If they look for Caring for Emily Lola Tan on Facebook, they'll find this link.
Caring for Emily Lola Tan.
Correct.
Okay, great. So hopefully people will go there and make a donation. I'm going to after this.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
What would you say to someone who's been diagnosed with cancer and is facing this kind of struggle in their life? What advice would you give them?
You do what you got to do if you want to survive. If your will to live is strong enough, you will do what you have to do.
If people want to contact the registry for bone marrow donation in Hong Kong, how can they do that?
What they need to do is just pop down to any of the 8 to 9 locations, Red Cross locations in Hong Kong, both on Hong Kong Island and New Territories. They'll go in, they'll likely be asked to donate blood. And if they don't want to donate blood, it's fine. They can just register as a bone marrow donor. There are prerequisites, there are eligibility. Age for Hong Kong is 18 to 60. The age range differs for America, for Australia, for Singapore. But for Hong Kong, it's 18 to 60.
People around the world who are listening, if they want to find their bone marrow registry in their country, what could they do? Just Google it?
Yeah, Google it, unless you are in a country where you don't have Google. So whatever search engine you decide to use, just search how to donate bone marrow in your region. Every country will have their own procedure or their own home of the registry.
If people want to donate to leukemia research, how can they do that?
There are 2 major ones in the States that have active research, and that's Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. The other one is Leukemia Foundation. The other one is also Australia. It's the Leukemia Foundation of Australia. I tried to look up the one in Europe, but I haven't been able to find ways of donating. And I wonder maybe it's because they need big donors, maybe not small donors. Maybe they need big donors. I'm not quite sure. But if you are in the States, for example, like this shirt I'm wearing right now is called Tap Cancer Out. And this has been set up by some folks who organize Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments throughout the state to raise funds to support leukemia research.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So it's through a sporting event, and it's not that hard to organize something like that in Hong Kong or anywhere in Asia either.
Well, there's a lot of companies and a lot of events and a lot of ways that people can raise money for charity, and people select the charity they want to donate for. So if you're trying to think of a charity, look for cancer research, look for leukemia research in particular, and send your money in that direction, because breast cancer and prostate cancer are getting enough.
I mean, they definitely have their bases covered.
Yeah,
that's for
sure.
Exactly.
And I don't mean that. Keep donating to all of them, okay? And finally, Emily, if you were an animal, what would you be and why?
My goodness. Something that flies. Initially, I was thinking something that flies would be kind of like a phoenix.
Oh, that's cool.
Just because it's kind of majestic.
And it's rising from the ashes.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, something mythical like that. Like I have a seahorse tattoo and I kind of like the mystic behind it as well.
Oh, that's lovely. Emily, thank you so much for meeting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for having the courage to share your story of not only your cancer, but your life. And I really feel that it's going to make a difference for many people out there. And it's really amazing to hear you share it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jules. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Two Girls on a Bench, the podcast. So we're 2 writers who tend to procrastinate just a bit.
We like to snack. We like to talk.
We don't have time to write, but we have time to do this podcast.
We certainly do. Join us on the bench.
Listen in.
At number 2 Girls on a Bench.
So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it? I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.